two different women, two different approaches, one outcome. They both wanted me. For each of them, I had to use a slightly different approach before getting them to the point where they were obsessed with me. That is the power of working on the hearts and minds of people. In this video, I'll be going through the 48 laws of power, and today I'll be going through law number 43, 44, and 45. Law number 43 says, work on the hearts and minds of others. If you want to influence and persuade people, begin by finding out their specific tastes and preferences. Make sure you understand what they desire and what they despise. Make sure you know what makes their hearts sing and what makes them sick. The key here is to tailor and adapt what you say and do depending on who you're talking to. By doing this, you work on the hearts and minds of others. If you can do this well, you will have an abundance of power and influence. To truly master this law, you need to understand two kinds of wants. Firstly, you need to understand wants which are common to every human being. And secondly, you need to understand wants which are specific to the person you're dealing with. For example, let's say you're a man trying to win over a woman. There are universal qualities which you need to have to even stand a chance. You need to be confident, responsible, be a gentleman, have a good sense of humor, be a good listener, etc. Basically, all the generic and obvious qualities which are well known to everyone. If you do these things, you'll be a contender. You'd have done just enough to be in the running. But this isn't enough to clinch victory and secure the woman. You need to do more than this. You need to appeal to her specific wants and her unique desires. This is the crux of what this law is all about. For example, I've seen this law work in my personal life. I've dated several women, and they've all been very different.
There was Brenda, Letitia, Linda, Felicia.
For each of them, I had to use a slightly different approach before getting them to the point where they were obsessed with me. One of the very first women I dated came from an immensely wealthy family. She'd grown up surrounded by luxury, and she could pretty much have whatever she wanted. As a result, she wasn't affected much by gifts. Dates at fancy and expensive restaurants didn't appeal to her, and it didn't matter whether or not I had the ability to provide. She simply desired a man who she had a connection with, a man who understood the nuances of her personality, a man who she could spend all day talking to and never run out of things to talk about. I picked up on this, and I worked on her heart and mind by being that guy. I researched her interests, and when I mentioned them in conversations, I would see her face light up. We would often discuss her personality, and she liked the fact that I seemed to know why she was the way she was. These were the things which appealed to her, and it was only a matter of time before she was mine. The different woman I dated came from a working class background. She also enjoyed the finer things of life, but she'd grown up having to see her family work for these things. For her, gifts truly meant something, regardless of the price. She appreciated fine dining at distinguished restaurants, and she was attracted by my desire to provide for my loved ones. She wanted a hard-working man, a man who was responsible, a man who was protective and committed to caring for her. I picked up on this, and I worked on her heart and mind by being that guy. I showed her more of my ambitious side, and she was excited to hear about my goals. Her face lit up when we would discuss ways of making money together in the future, and she liked the fact that I was focused on building a secure future for myself and my family. These are the things which appealed to her, and it was only a matter of time before she was mine. As you can see, two different women, two different approaches based on who they were, one outcome. They both wanted me. That is the power of working on the hearts and minds of people. Everyone is different and unique, and everyone feels good when their uniqueness is respected, valued, and appreciated. Even the coldest people are touched by this. Take time to learn these specific things about people, and then use this knowledge to appeal to their hearts and their minds. You'll be appealing to the very essence of who they are. When applied properly, this law is truly irresistible. Law number 44 says, disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. It's much easier to trust someone who is similar to you than it is to trust someone who is different from you. This is human nature. If something is familiar to us, we're quite comfortable and at ease. But if it's different, we see it as a potential threat. Therefore, if you want to win someone over and disarm them of any suspicion or hostility, you must use the mirror effect. This means creating the impression that you see things in a similar way to how they see things. It means creating the impression that you're like-minded. Get them to the point where they see a little bit of themselves in you. Once you achieve this, you'll be considered as someone who can be trusted. A typical example of this law is when people code switch. Code switching is when you change your manner of speaking depending on the people around you. If your parents are immigrants, this is something you'll be extremely familiar with. My parents are immigrants from Malawi in Africa, and when I was living with them, I noticed that they had about 2 ways of speaking depending on the audience. If they were speaking with their fellow African friends, then they would speak with an African accent. But if they were speaking on the phone, negotiating a new price for our internet, for example, then they would be speaking with a more British accent. It's not just immigrants who do this. We all do it to an extent. The way you speak in a job interview is not the same way you speak to your friends. This is one of those laws that many of us all know instinctively, which is why many of us do it anyway. That's how you can use the mirror effect to disarm. But the mirror effect can also be used to infuriate. Have you ever met someone who is extremely unpleasant, almost unbearable, but they don't seem to realize just how unpleasant they are? They are just living their life. It's extremely frustrating. You might try speaking to them, but your message isn't registering. An effective way to deal with this is to use the mirror effect. What you do is you mirror their behavior to make them understand how their actions affect others. In a sense, you give them their taste of their own medicine. Your aim isn't to infuriate the person, but it's often an unavoidable consequence. But once their fury subsides, they are able to see the error of their ways. A good example of this is people who interrupt others when they are talking and don't wait for them to finish talking. This is so annoying. Some of these people don't know they are doing it, and even if they are told, they might deny it. A certain way to get them to understand how their actions affect others is to get them to experience what it's like to be interrupted. When this happens to them, sure, they might be angry, but they will learn. And for some people, this is the only way to learn. This law is a great tool for bridging the gap between people who are very different to you. It's also a great tool for making people aware of their own actions. The way you use it will depend on the context. Law number 45 says, preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Once people get used to doing things in a certain way, they will cling to it strongly. This is because humans are creatures of habit. They will resist anything which requires them to change their behavior from what they have been accustomed to for many years. If you want people to accept change and do away with established habits, you need to do it gradually. Don't do anything too drastic. The more steady the transition, the less resistance you will encounter. Here is an example of this law. I have a younger cousin who I'm very close to, and he's very dear to me. A few years ago, things were not going well for him at all. He wasn't sleeping well, he wasn't exercising, he was only eating fast food, and he spent most of his time in bed playing video games. I could tell he wasn't happy with who he was at this point in life. One day, I came across a video of David Goggins talking about callousing the mind and learning to embrace discomfort. Typical David Goggins material. And I said to myself, my cousin needs to see this. So I went to his house and I forced him to watch the video. Then I disconnected the PlayStation, got rid of the TV in his room, and made him promise that he would sleep better and eat better. I then told him that we would start going running the next day at 6 a.m. in the morning. How do you think this went? Do you think he appreciated what I did? Do you think my approach worked? Of course not. I had done too much too quickly. In fact, this experience had been traumatic for him, and he tried to avoid me for about a month. I don't blame him at all. My approach had been completely wrong. I violated this law of power. Rather than doing everything at once, I started by encouraging him to take up one sport, only one, and to be really good at it. After that, I gradually encouraged him to improve on the other things in his life. After a year of gradual improvement, he was a changed person. The reason the second approach worked was that I had preached the need for change, but I did not reform too much at once. When we've done something for a long time in the same way, our brains develop strong neural pathways which are associated with that behavior. This makes it very difficult to change immediately. If you try and change too quickly, your attempts can backfire. Change is a good thing. Without change, it's not possible to improve. If you want to successfully make changes, make sure you do it in a way which is gradual and steady. Don't rush. One of the most difficult things to change are habits that you no longer want to do. This requires a lot of discipline. I have written an ebook which is a step-by-step guide on how you can achieve discipline. I've used the steps myself and they've helped me massively. The link for the book is in the description and I'm giving away the first chapter for free. That is law number 43, 44, and 45 from the 48 Laws of Power. If you enjoyed this video, you will enjoy the other videos I've made on the 48 Laws of Power. You will find them in this playlist. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.